channel. Welcome if you're new. I'm Stacy, and today we are going to be doing a Magnolia Blossom in mixed media. I am starting out with my Zebra mechanical pencil in 5mm. It's a 0.5 millimeter. I love this mechanical pencil. It's really nice to hold in the hand. It's got a solid build and a nice little grip at the end. I'm going ahead and drawing in all of the deep dark shadows first, getting that branch in. The thought pattern is to make this branch look like it's coming into the page and the flower look like it's coming out of the page. Kind of give it that 3D feel, which normally I don't think about. It just kind of happens in my pieces. I've been asked a couple times, how do you get it to look 3D? I have no idea. I have no clue at all why it looks that way. It just sort of happens. But that is my desire with this piece. I'm going ahead and drawing in the petals, trying to leave the whites white and just get in the basic shape here. I don't want it to go completely off the edge of the page. I do that sometimes, but for this particular piece, I wanted it to stay in that upper right corner for the pink flower. I thought about going ahead and doing a time-lapse of this. I do a lot of time-lapse videos. Instead, I decided to try a voiceover and walk you through what it's like to actually create a mixed media piece in real time. This piece took a little under an hour, and I really enjoy using graphite pencil to get in a nice bold drawing and then going over it with other mediums. Sometimes I will also go in directly with ink and do a bold ink drawing and go over that with other mediums, usually watercolor. But for this piece, I decided to go in with pencil first and get those shadows in, get the basic shapes in, really pull the petals, getting petal placement in right now. Trying not to overthink it. I tend to overthink and get lost in details really early on in a drawing, and that is one of my faults, I guess you could say, in doing a detailed piece. Is instead of putting in the big basic shapes first, which is something I'm practicing and learning how to do, even though I've been drawing and painting, since I was a young kid, that is one of the harder things for me, is to put in the big basic shapes and then go in after you get the big basic shapes in and put in your values and your color and really make it feel the way you want it to feel. Right now I am trying to get in the darker shadows. Oh, sorry if you can hear that. There's people outside. It is a beautiful sunny day today. And all the windows are open in the apartment. And you can probably hear a little bit of road noise. I will try to edit that out. But for the most part, that's just the way it is. I think I took a pretty large chunk of time doing the pencil drawing. I'm not really sure what else to say here. I guess I could just explain what I'm doing. I'm getting the fold of the tip of that flower in. It just kind of, the very tip of it gently folds back on itself. And to get that rolled feeling of a flower or even fabric, draw the shape draw the basic shape and then put in your shading afterwards. That's what I'm doing right here. Getting the basic shape in and then going over the top to get the upper line of that rolled piece of petal and going along the edge. There's also a thin white line along the edge of all of the petals that I'm trying to keep. I'm trying to get the indication in now so I don't forget about it. And now I'm getting in, the petals have a lot of texture and a lot of bumps in them. And then the color shift is pretty drastic. It goes from a deep dark pink into a light pink into an almost white or cream color. And then what I'm doing right now is just getting in the dark pinks and the shape of the flower, putting in the shadowed areas. And this all just takes time, and it's a lot of back and forth. And you'll notice on the stem of the flower, I didn't draw in the upper portion, that upper edge. And there are a few other details that I haven't put in yet. We'll get back to that in a little bit. I really wanted to just get in this petal, all the textural lines. And a little bit of hatching and cross hatching on where the textures, to give it a little bit of texture, where the shadows meet and the colors get dark and then light. It's very veiny looking. Like if you look at a leaf through the sun, or even flower petals in light, you can see through them a little bit. You can see all the veins and textures in the petals. And that's what I'm trying to convey here. Sorry if my voice sounds a little scratchy. I'm getting over a little bit of a cold. My very first cold in a couple of years. I'm not bragging. I'm just stunned that I haven't had a cold in so long. I forgot how draining it is. I've spent the last few days sleeping. This past week has been challenging. I haven't put up any videos last week because I felt so tired and so drained. I just wasn't feeling like creating any art. But now I'm getting better, and I'm feeling a little more energetic, and the spring has sprung here. It feels very like it's on the verge of getting warm out every day. I love spring. Spring and fall are my favorite seasons. And here I'm getting that there's a central petal, and then there's a back petal, and right here I'm trying to delineate that outward petal from the petal that's on the inside that's heavily shadowed in that nook down there. Then I got carried away, pulled that line out. That's a kneaded eraser. I love my kneaded erasers. They work the best for me. A lot of people don't care for them. They can smudge, and depending on what you use them for, I generally just use them for my graphite drawings, but they can smudge your paper and leave marks if you want to put watercolor down and make a clean watercolor piece. The kneaded erasers can leave marks on your paper. Oil residue from your hands can get in the eraser and smudge your paper because you do have to stretch them and knead them. Thus, kneaded eraser. I'm playing with one right now as I record. But I find them to be very handy with lifting out unwanted pencil marks. I don't really care for the white erasers very much. Those, I have a couple of them. I just don't have any to hand. But I don't care for how they work, so I've always used a kneaded eraser. Anyone else who has suggestions on erasers for watercolor or mixed media pieces can drop comments below. I'm sure we all have our favorites, right? And right here I'm getting in that dark shadow on the petal. Yeah, we're only 10 minutes in and I'm still drawing this flower. I honestly didn't think it took me this long to draw to do the actual pencil drawing portion of this video. And I am right here trying to get that shape of that interior petal correct. Getting in those detailed, veiny, textural marks that are on the petal with the pencil. Again, using directional hatching and cross-hatching lines on those veins to give it that textured look. And getting the edge of that petal in right here, trying to remember that there is a bit of a, not a lot, but a bit of white or cream on the edges of the petals. They fade from a deep pink at the base all the way up into a kind of pale pink and cream at the tips. I don't normally draw a lot of flowers. Generally speaking, flowers are not my thing. But over the last couple years, I've been interested, especially this year, I'm trying to challenge myself to draw more motorcycle. Trying to draw more nature-based subject matter. Because I tend to draw, I mean, not that animals aren't nature-based, but I tend to draw a lot of animals, and because that's what I enjoy. I'm trying to watercolor more landscapes and flowers, and in broad terms, I'm trying to narrow it down to a particular flower for the month, or a particular tree for the month, or in my nature sketchbook. That's what I'm doing. I'll pick a theme or a plant or a flower, and I will concentrate on that for the month, and that is what will be that month's subject matter for the spread or two that I'll work on, because I have 5 sketchbooks that I'm working on right now. I needed a drink, apparently. Oh. And focusing the camera, making sure everything's in focus. Checking again because I'm insecure. I have recorded videos where I have done most of the video and 90% of it is floating in and out of focus, and I've been so disappointed because the particular piece of art that I was creating was something that I really enjoyed, and most of the video was out of focus. So at the very beginning of this video, I had to clip out the first section of drawing the stem in because it was floating in and out of focus. So I have a little sticky note off the side of my camera. Check your focus. Check the focus first. And I'm drawing in the very edge of the petals. And yeah, I'm just getting in all of those textures and shadows. Oh, there's a tear in the petal that I wanted to leave in. I really like that. I mean, nothing's perfect in nature. Nothing's perfectly balanced. There's symmetry for sure, but if you look at a tree or a flower or a plant, 99.9% of the time there is an asymmetry to it. There is a little portion of that particular thing that's created by nature that is not perfectly symmetrical, and I know that I try to create that when I'm drawing something natural. I look for the symmetry in the piece, and if you look at the reference photo, there is no part of this that is symmetrical. The plant is the branch is out of focus at the base of the picture, and then it comes into focus as the flower itself comes into full focus. And yeah, even the basic shape of this flower is not a circle or an oval. It's a little bit wonky. which may be what drew me to it, considering I don't draw a lot of flowers, but once again, practice makes better, and that's my motto this year. Practice makes better. So here we are practicing. Yeah, real-time drawing, 15 minutes in, and we are just starting to get to the finishing touches of the pencil drawing. Not a lot to say, honestly. I was listening to a book while I was drawing, which is what I normally do when I'm creating. I will put on whatever book or I'm listening to in the moment, or music. Currently listening to Mark Tufo's Zombie Fallout series. I'm on book 6 through Audible. I love Audible. Love, love, love Audible. So many just fantastic selections in Audible. There are, I think I have like 300 books in my collection of books, and most of them are sets. I like a nice set of books with the story continues and continues, especially if the writer's really good. And I feel like Mark Tufo is a good storyteller. He tells a good story, and I like the way the story flows. And the narrator, oh, I'm not going to remember the name of the narrator off the top of my head, but then the person that's narrating all of these books has a good voice. He's got that, he just has a really good voice that's smooth, but just deep enough that it's soothing to listen to. I tend to not really care for female narrators, I've found. I also don't like female vocalists, generally speaking. Don't get me wrong, there are female vocalists that I do enjoy, but for the most part, if a woman is singing, I will, and she has a higher pitched voice, I can't do it. And same for narrators, if the woman's voice is maybe too feminine or too high pitched, I just can't listen to her. I prefer a deeper, soothing, maybe because I feel like my voice is a little soothing. I don't know. But yeah, he's really good at giving the characters some little bit of their own voice, without going too over the top. And the storytelling is really good. It's of course, zombie fallout, post-apocalyptic storyline, and I've talked about it in a couple of my videos. But yeah, it's a good listen. There's a humor, you cry, adventure, definitely adventure. And Trip is one of my favorite characters. If you listen to, he doesn't come in until the 6th book, but he is definitely one of my favorite characters. An addition to the story that I wasn't expecting. And then the name itself of the character should clue you in as to excuse me, what kind of outside the box character he is. There's a bunch of different stories too within the storyline that I really like. The main character gets several different storylines in different series that Tufo has done, which is interesting to me as well. I like that kind of thought pattern. Like, what if you were the same you, but in a different or parallel timeline kind of thing? I like that stuff. Anything sci-fi related, I'm hands down in all the way. It doesn't even have to be good sci-fi. I will watch or listen to and assess and decide whether or not I want to enjoy it again and again. Because some bad sci-fi is also enjoyable for me. Well, maybe not bad, but more B-rated sci-fi stuff. At any rate, Tufo gives his character different timeline stories as well. So there's the Lichen Fallout, which, as you can tell, is werewolf based, and then there's a Indian Hill series, which is sci-fi based, which is a favorite. The main character in that storyline goes through a huge shift and change. It's good, and the way that he pulls the different characters in from the main zombie Fallout storyline into this story, the other timelines. It's interesting. I enjoy it. And we're almost done with the pencil drawing. I'm putting in the last little bit of buds. I'm now that I'm watching this and I'm thinking I should have probably made the bottom end of that step kind of less in focus, like the reference photo, and it would have felt even more 3D to me. But at this point, I'm putting in the little buds that are on the branch, the little green bits, and I'm taking artist's prerogative and going as detailed as I feel it going, and deciding what shapes they look like they are. And I got this bud a little too close to the other one, but just went with it. Instead of erasing, I just left it. Because once again, unless you have the reference photo, you don't know. Like, you don't know how this really looked. So, just leave it. Let it flow. Sometimes that's good to do. And the branch is very bendy and curvy, which I don't feel like I conveyed that quite as well as I could have, but should have grabbed another cup of coffee before I started this. Yeah, overall, I'm very pleased with the pencil drawing. I like where it went. I'm deciding right now what my next step is. See me tap my finger. I'm thinking, what do I want to do next? Let's move these out of the way and pull out the watercolors. This is my M Gram palette, which I use in almost all of my watercolors. I am trying very hard to touch all of my art supplies this year, so I have been using my many other watercolor palettes. And if you are interested, I have a all my watercolor palettes video out there, and you can go into my playlist. I think it's palettes and swatches, or swatches and palettes, something like that. I wanted to put in a little bit of a background. I was thinking at first of just putting in a background and then leaving the pencil drawing as is. But once I started putting in the background with my, I believe I'm using the ultramarine and a little bit of neutral tint to kind of tone down that ultramarine. I had some neutral tint in that little well right there where the blue is right now. And I wanted to keep this kind of light and kind of bokeh blurry without doing salt or other mediums on top to give it that bokeh look. Trying to remember to keep it light and loose and patchy looking, not get lost in detail of making a smooth background. That's not what I wanted to go for here. Got a little bit on the stem. And here I was thinking, oh, all right, I'm getting too lost in perfection. Loosen up and really start, there we go, scribbling around on that page. This paintbrush is my Princeton Neptune number 18 round. It is my go-to watercolor brush for backgrounds. I love this brush. It was a splurge for me. I think it was $20. I'll link it below for this brush, but it's one of those purchases that if you take care of your brush, you're only going to do it once. It's an investment in your craft or your art journey. And here I wanted to really soften that out and leave it kind of unfinished on the edges. I didn't want the background to go all the way to the edges. And then I've got a bunch of green up there. I never clean my palette because I find that I use most of my colors over and over again. I usually mix my sap green, which you could see in the well. I've reached bottom on. You can tell which colors I use the most. I've reached bottom on them, and I did just refill my palette a couple of months ago. I'm trying to keep it muddy. I want a little murky, muddy, not terribly delineated background. You know, we're going for that soft focus effect. And watercolor dries so much lighter, and that's another thing that I tend to forget, is that watercolor dries a lot lighter than when you put it down. So this will soften quite a bit and become more of a glow on the page than a suggestion of anything else. And here I've got a bunch of my very favorite quinacridone rose. And I'm deciding, do I really want to do this? Because I know quin is a very vibrant color. It goes down super strong, and I tend to use it too strong out of the gate. So more water, and then soften it out and drag it around. Leave some white space. Don't get it too dark too fast. And I decided to put in a base of quin, really, really light, mostly water with just a tint of color on that flower. And here I am committing. I'm committing to putting watercolor in. We're going to do this. I'm not going to use colored pencil. I'm just going to go over with watercolor. Colored pencil is a very slow medium. I did just do a colored pencil tree study that is up. That took hours and hours over the course of several days. And I didn't enjoy the paper either. This paper is Artist Loft. Yeah, Artist Loft 140 pound cold press paper. I got it at Michael's art craft store last year when Mom and I went shopping. It's a fairly nice paper. It's, as you can see, not taped down at all. And I haven't wet the back of the paper or anything like that. That is one of the tricks you can do if you don't want to tape your paper down and you have a surface that you're working on that is water resistant. You can wet the back of your paper and work on the front of your paper, and it will stay pretty flat without taping it down. It's a good little hack that I've learned from other artists while on my art journey and watching YouTube videos to learn how to do all this amazing art stuff. Getting in my dark pinks, dragging around. Oh, need to change battery in the camera. That happens fairly regularly. Grabbed a little bit of cobalt green to make it a little brighter. I've never used, not never, but fairly never use just one color. Like I very rarely use one color of green. I will grab sap green and cobalt and a little bit of azo yellow and mix them all together. I'll put sap green next to azo yellow on my palette and mix them as I go. It creates a more interesting green, a more natural looking green for me. My muddy colors that I leave on my palette. It feels more realistic to me. And I do tend to work in a more realistic-ish fashion. That's just what I enjoy. I'm not going, generally speaking, for true realism, but a more realistic feel. And I'm going with burnt sienna for the stem. Oh, I was thinking it wouldn't be as dark as it is. I used it a little too dark to start. I was just going with it, like it's down. We want this to look uniform. We'll blot a little to soften it. And just keep going. Get that base color down. And if you did use a color too dark and you don't enjoy that, the depth or the value that you've put down, you can take a paper towel and blot. Just press down really hard on it, and it will absorb up most of that color for you and soften it out enough that it becomes a tint rather than a dark color. There we go, and I'm not sure I like how dark it is, so I'm going to blot here and there. Just soften that a little bit. And I'm grabbing some more of that muddy green, which is a mixture, once again, of azo yellow and sap green and cobalt and probably a touch of gamboge. I tend to mix those colors together to make yellow greens and more sap green to make a more earthy green. And dropping it in on the little green parts of the buds. A little bit of straight azo yellow to brighten that was the thought, to make them a little more yellow green instead of, because buds tend to be a young green. They're more of a bright green. Was my thought pattern there. And did each bud in turn, and then fussing over this edge and fussing over those edges. Pausing to think about what I want to do next. I'm grabbing some quinacridone rust, which is a favorite color, and neutral tint to kind of gray that down a bit, make it a more gray brown. And I find neutral tint to be one of the most handy colors. It is Mgram's neutral tint. There are other brands out there of neutral tint. This one is my favorite. It has a little bit of a purple bias, but you can use it to mix any of your colors to make a dulled down, softer, more gray or darker, deeper value, which is what I'm doing here to get the lower, more shadowed areas in on the stem. The decision-making process while you're painting, if you're listening to a book, you're not really thinking. Now that I'm doing a voiceover and watching myself paint this, it's intriguing to watch the decision-making process as I work. There's a lot of pausing when you're creating, a lot of thinking, and when you do a time lapse, no one sees that. You don't see the pause, the thought, the moments that it takes to go from one section of your art to another. Even in my videos that aren't time lapsed, I do cut out the more boring bits. Let's see, get the end of that stem in nice and dark. And the thought here was to make the end of the stem dark, and then, where the light reflects off the top of it, leave it fairly light so that it looks a little more 3D, a little more realistic, like it's popping off that page. Neutral tint and that quinacridone rose mixed together, thinking that would put some of that pink hue that I see in the stem in the reference photo into the painting and give it a little more balance. Getting a little carried away at this point. There is a glow here that I wanted to get, but it's too wide. I went outside my lines. I'm grabbing a tissue and trying to blot that back up. And then I decided to just go with it. It's fine. Quin Rose is very staining color, so it's hard to lift it out completely. Trying here to lift it out. Not terribly effective, and I'm just like, never mind, we'll go with it. It's fine. Leave it alone. Don't fuss. And then going over there again with that same neutral tint Quin Rose mixture all the way up the entire part of that branch there, the stem of the flower. It's actually a branch. Magnolia flowers are on trees, now that I think about it. I should have been calling it a branch this whole time. My bad. But I do like how I got that little bit of glow on the top of the branch there. That I'm pleased with that pink color. There we go. And a little more Quin Rose. And kind of, now that this is a little bit dry here, I can go in and get in a little bit more of the deeper rose color. Trying to darken where those textures are. Lots and lots of texture on this flower. And really make it pop. Without fussing too much. I tend to fuss too much and overwork the piece and get really, really carried away when I'm enjoying, like I'm really enjoying this part right here. Dragging that almost dry brush over the top of the texture of the paper, putting in the shadow areas. And the brush is pretty dry here. I'm not trying to completely cover, I'm trying to create texture. And if you have a textured paper, it can do a lot of the work for you. You just drag that brush over and let it dry. Let it be. Once again, I tend to overwork and I keep going and going. So my pro tip here is to lay it down and let it go. And I am actually thinking this to myself. All right, that's good. Good, good, good. I like how dark that is. I like the textures. Okay. Leave it alone. Stop fussing. And the paint that's on the palette is almost completely dry. This color is intense, this quinacridone rose. You don't need a lot of it to go a long ways. I'm getting in those shadows to make those petals feel individual and like they're layered on each other. And I'm really liking how this is turning out. Does anybody else like their work? Like I a lot of artists that I follow, they get done with a piece and they're like, it's alright. I generally like most of the pieces that I create. Although I don't do still lifes either. I did paint a still life yesterday that I was not pleased with. These are my Faber Castell India ink liners and brush pens. I love these. I would like the entire collection of these pens. I have quite a few. They are my go-to drawing pens in my sketchbooks when I want to add color to something or textures. This one is, what color are you? Middle Purple Pink, number 125. And I grabbed out the darker one too, but I don't believe I used it. The Magenta 133 is also beautiful. I believe I got these in a set. Like a set of reds and a set of blues. Like blues and greens came together. And the reds came together. Siennas and sepia. I don't know how you say that. At any rate, I'm using this one to create those vein textures and to darken in the bottom of the petal to give it a little more realistic detail, to make it really feel textured and pop off the page a little bit. A few lines in here, not too many. It was a dark color choice and I don't want to get too carried away. But you can crosshatch and get those textures that you like, that I like, and make them really pop off the page. And get in some deeper shadows along that edge where it's white along that lip, and make that white line kind of pop. Now it's not bright white in the reference photo all the way down the edge of that petal, but I do believe I did leave it like that. Let's look at the finish. I did. I left it pretty bright white along that edge, but I'm happy with that. And just hatching and cross hatching, doing straight lines to And then a little bit of curving there to make that one petal look like it is kind of cupping the edge of those other petals. And the bottom part of that flower is pretty dark, so I'm trying to get that the very bottom where all the petals come together pretty dense with this color. Again, middle purple pink. I really recommend these Faber Castell Indie ink pens. They're really nice. They are archival because they're India ink and permanent. You can do an entire drawing with these and then go over it with watercolor. And for the most part, if you let them dry completely and you're not too rough on the paper, you can watercolor over the top of these and they won't bleed around. Now, if you fuss too much, of course, with the watercolor and the paper, and depending on the combination of the paper and the water and the paint and the ink, you can make the fibers of the paper fall apart a little bit if you get too carried away. I wanted to crisp up the edge of this and get that little fold at the tip of that petal, make it look like it's really folded over. But once again, this petal is pretty light back here, and I didn't want to get too carried away with details and darken it up too much, which is where I was going with this. Dragging the dark color up, 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 with thin lines, give it some texture. And then this outside little tiny bit of petal on the edge there. Just darken that, just the edge, and leave the rest, because it's pretty light. And mostly fussing at this point, just going back and forth, and this part of that other petal is kind of on the other side of the flower a little bit and tucked behind that front petal, and I was trying to push it back a little more. There we go. I'm pretty happy with that. A little bit more on this. The edge, the center of this petal is pretty delineated in the reference photo, and I got a little too crisp here, but I mean, it is what it is. That's what I'm doing right now, is trying to, my hands are the way, you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm trying to get those shadows in and textures and crisp up some of the deeper color. There we go. And once again, it's just a back and forth and back and forth. You get one section done and the other section looks a little too light. So you're playing with value here. You're getting your darker values as dark as you need them to be to convey those shadows, and at the same time leaving your middle and light values. It's a fine balance. But I love the feel of this flower. I like all the textures. I like the graphite peeking through underneath. If you don't like that, you can draw your flower really, really light in graphite, or draw it in color erase pencil and then layer all your colored pencils on top. You could do this in colored pencils. It'd be beautiful. If you like that realistic look, you could totally do that. Now that I'm watching this, I feel like I fussed too much with the pink, but I'm trying to get this side of this petal to be a bit more in shadow. There we go. That's better. I like that. Okay, I dig it. Now put this away. Put it down. And grab out my green. This is May Green. There's a favorite. Number 170. And I have May Green in the liner, the fine liner, and in the brush. And this is the brush one. The brush pen is really nice. I'm trying to really make some bright spots on those buds. Good, good. And then I grab out these lighter browns. They're super bright. This is sanguine, and I have sanguine in several different sizes of fine nib, and then this is the brush one. I'm trying to brighten that branch a little bit, make it look like a young branch. You know, when branches are young, their colors are super vibrant. And just solidifying some of the darker areas. Trying not to get too carried away, but I think I do an alright job of getting this. And it went a little too far out, and I'll just embrace it, make it a part of the piece, and then remembering to leave some of the brighter spots, not color it all in. This isn't a color book. And then I wanted to grab sepia. I know it looks black, but it's not. It is sepia. It was a nice. This is dark sepia, actually, number 175 fine liner, 0.0 or 0.5 millimeter. It's my favorite size of drawing pen. And going in and getting the shadows delineated and gives the branch some textures so that it feels more branch-like. And once again, I got too detailed on the end of that stem. I should have left it a little more out of focus. Well, I went with it, and it is what it is. I do like this piece. I think it came out really pretty. And just getting some textures around those buds so that they look like they're coming like out of the branch. And that one bud right there is behind. It's coming in kind of back and behind. So that's what I'm trying to convey there without obliterating the green part. There we go. And close to done. Taking a look at the whole thing and thinking I need to get in a little more shadow here and under the bottom edge of this piece of the branch so that it looks like the top of it is glowing a bit. Yeah, and a little bump right there because I think I got it too smooth. This branch is not smooth at all. It's got lots of little bumps and nubs on it. And there we go. All done. I really enjoy how this one came out. I like all the textures and how it feels like it's coming up off the page. A little close up of all the lines and the graphite showing through and all the different textures on the branch. Yeah, and I like the background, how it dried all soft and muted. I really enjoy this piece. I hope you guys like it. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.